Picture Thursday, June 11, 2026. You wake up, you grab your coffee, pull out your phone, and the headlines are just this totally chaotic blur.
Yeah, a massive military and diplomatic flare-up in the Middle East, the United States and Iran.
Exactly. And if you were just scrolling through breaking alerts, I mean, the sheer volume of contradictory information is completely disorienting.
It really is the ultimate fog of war scenario. When you consume conflicts through, just fragmented push notifications, you're left with absolutely zero context.
Right, you just see an explosion reported here, a political threat issued there.
Uh-huh. And it all just blends into this overwhelming sense of global crisis without any discernible structure or, frankly, any logic to it.
Well, that is exactly the mission for this deep dive. We are taking a step back from the noise today.
Which is so desperately needed, honestly.
It really is. So we're relying on a comprehensive, freshly translated intelligence breakdown from the Vietnamese news outlet VN Express. And we are going to extract the critical facts of this specific day.
Right, getting down to the actual timeline.
Yeah, we want to map out the physical reality on the ground and then compare it directly to the political narratives being broadcast across the airwaves.
And the separation between those two realms, I mean, the physical battlefield and the information space is just vital here.
Because they tell totally different stories, right?
Totally different. To understand June 11th, we really have to meticulously examine the tactical intent behind the strikes.
Okay, so look at the specific anatomy of what is actually being destroyed.
Exactly. And then we have to weigh that physical reality against the highly divergent claims both sides are making about a backdoor peace agreement.
Okay, let's unpack this. Let's strip away the political theater for just a minute and start with the physical reality.
I think that's the best place to start, yeah.
So looking at the anatomy of Iran's retaliation on that Thursday morning, according to the translated reports, the IRGC claimed to have hit 18 important U.S. Army targets.
Right, 18 targets.
And these were not just like random volleys into the empty desert. They targeted two specific air bases in Kuwait, Ali El Salam and Ahmad Al Jabar.
Right.
And they also hit the Sheikh Isa military airport over in Bahrain.
And, those locations reveal a great deal about the strategic geometry of the operation.
How so?
Well, Kuwait and Bahrain are basically the foundational logistics and projection hubs for the U.S. military's entire footprint in the Persian Gulf.
Oh, wow. So they went right for the core.
Exactly. By striking those specific nodes, Iran is demonstrating its reach. It's a geographic message confirming they can hit the staging grounds that facilitate American air and naval power.
But the report gets even more specific about the mechanics of the attack, which I found fascinating.
The specific weapon systems.
Yeah, because Iranian state media, Mer News, they specifically noted the use of Shahed drone swarms to target communication antennas and the Patriot air defense radar at the U.S. Navy's 5th Fleet Base in Bahrain.
The 5th Fleet Base, right.
Yeah. And this is where the strategy shifts from just, causing random damage to something much more calculated. I mean, they aren't trying to blow up runways. They're hunting the radar systems.
That is the crucial distinction right there. Taking out a Patriot radar is fundamentally different from targeting, like, a barracks or a supply depot.
Because it blinds them.
Right. A Patriot battery is effectively blind and totally useless without its radar array. It's a giant paperweight.
Wow.
So by hunting those specific sensors and communication antennas, you are degrading the adversary's situational awareness. You're actively severing the nervous system of the base.
So that commanders basically can't see incoming threats or coordinate a response.
Precisely. They're trying to put the base in the dark.
But hold on, because that surgical precision, it seems completely at odds with the public statements coming from Iranian leadership on the exact same day.
Yes. The rhetoric.
Right. Because we have this quote from the IRGC Air Force Commander, General Majid Musavi. He said, and I quote, "This is a response to America's reckless actions. We will turn the region into hell for you."
Which is a very strong statement.
Yeah, turning the region into hell sounds like unconstrained, scorched earth warfare. Just complete chaos. Yet you are describing a highly systematic effort to just unplug antennas. How do those two things align?
They align perfectly, actually, when you separate the military objective from the psychological one.
Okay, explain that.
So turning the region into hell is a message designed purely for public consumption. It projects overwhelming power and terror to their adversaries and strength to their own people.
Right, it's good PR for a military base.
Exactly. But the tactical execution on the ground has to be cold and mathematical. The military doesn't actually want chaos.
They want control.
Right, they want a paralyzed enemy. So the rhetoric is apocalyptic, but the strikes themselves are totally methodical.
That makes a lot of sense. And, that duality also shows up in what happened on the water that day.
Oh, the incident in the Strait of Hormuz.
Yes. Fars News reported that the IRGC fired missiles and drones at a U.S. warship in the strait, and they claimed they forced this massive vessel to physically turn around and retreat.
Right, but CNTCOM immediately issued a statement explicitly saying no U.S. warship was hit.
Exactly. Completely opposing claims.
Which perfectly highlights the mechanics of information warfare in real time.
Because someone has to be lying, right?
Well, notice how both statements can technically be true in their own twisted way.
Wait, really? How?
Think about it. A swarm of drones and missiles could be fired at the ship, right? And the warship might execute an evasive maneuver that takes it on a different heading.
Right.
And then ultimately, no munitions actually make contact with the hull. So CNTCOM can truthfully claim the ship took no damage, which projects resilience and technological superiority.
Oh, I see. And meanwhile, Fars News frames that same evasive maneuver as a humiliating retreat.
Exactly. They project dominance. The physical event on the water is exactly the same, but the narrative weaponizes the ambiguity of the situation.
Wow. Okay, so moving on. General Mousavi justified all of these Iranian strikes by citing America's reckless actions.
Right. That was his justification.
So let's look at CNTCOM's ledger for that exact same day. Let's see what prompted that accusation.
Yes, the mirror tactic.
The report details that CNTCOM completed a series of self-defense attacks against Iranian targets, and their target list includes Iran's communication systems, air defense positions, and surveillance equipment.
Notice the targets.
Wait, yeah, I have to challenge this framing. CNTCOM calls this self-defense against unprovoked aggression. But looking at these two lists side by side, they're identical.
It's the exact same target profile.
Iran is taking out American radars, and the U.S. is taking out Iranian air defenses. Aren't both sides executing the exact same offensive strategy and just slapping different labels on it?
What's fascinating here is you are identifying the core friction of modern military doctrine.
What do you mean?
Well, when two sophisticated militaries engage, they don't just, line up in a field and trade blows like it's the 1800s.
Right.
The very first objective before you move major assets, before you launch a primary offensive, is to shape the operational environment.
Meaning you systematically unscrew every light bulb in the house before you kick in the front door.
That is a highly accurate way to visualize it, yeah.
Yeah.
In military terms, you are attacking the enemy's OD loop.
ODA loop.
Yes, ODA. Their ability to observe, orient, decide, and act.
Okay.
If you destroy their surveillance equipment, they cannot observe. If you destroy their communication systems, commanders cannot orient or decide.
And if you take out their air defenses, they can't act to stop the next wave.
Exactly. So CCCOM, framing it as self-defense, is a necessary legal and political justification. But tactically speaking, dismantling the opponent's ability to see and communicate is a classic, highly aggressive precursor maneuver.
It essentially means the physical battlefield on June 11th was just this giant high-tech race to paralyze the opponent.
Yes.
Both sides are pouring millions of dollars of munitions into ensuring the other side is totally deaf and blind.
And that race to paralyze usually indicates one of two scenarios is imminent.
Which are?
Either both sides are clearing the board for a massive, catastrophic escalation of hostilities, like an all-out war, or they are applying maximum tactical pressure to force a very hard, very fast stalemate where neither side dares to make the next move.
Okay, but if both militaries are furiously unplugging each other's nervous systems in preparation for either total war or a tense stalemate, how on earth do we reconcile that with the diplomatic chatter happening on the very same day?
Yes, the political side.
Because when we look at the political narrative detailed in this VN Express report, it feels like it is broadcasting from an alternate universe.
The divergence between the tactical reality and the diplomatic narrative is perhaps the most fascinating aspect of this entire timeline.
Right. Here's where it gets really interesting. Let's look strictly at the translation of the text regarding the diplomatic channels.
Okay.
On this exact same day, June 11th, President Donald Trump goes on Fox News and claims he has spoken directly with Iranian officials.
Direct contact, supposedly.
Yeah. And according to the report, he states that these officials asked the U.S. to stop the attacks. And he goes on to predict that the military campaign will stop soon, provided an agreement is reached on this very day.
Right.
But he adds the caveat that if the agreement isn't signed, the attacks will resume.
So if we connect this to the bigger picture, the mechanics of that statement are heavily layered.
How so?
It projects absolute diplomatic dominance. It communicates to his audience that the pressure campaign, those very strikes dismantling Iranian radars, has successfully broken the adversary's resolve.
The opponent is allegedly asking for a pause.
Exactly. And a victorious agreement is just sitting on the table waiting for a signature.
But here's the catch. The Iranian media completely rejects that claim. They insist no such communication ever took place.
A total denial.
And it isn't just, like, media pundits denying it. Iran's Supreme Military Command, the Qatam al-Anbiya Central Headquarters, releases a formal statement asserting their forces are ready to fight to the last breath and promising a crushing response to U.S. aggression.
Right, doubling down on the aggression.
So how does a standoff like this function in reality? If one leader says, they begged us to stop, and the opposing military command says, we will fight to the death, someone is operating in a complete fiction.
Yeah, it's entirely contradictory.
How do the respective militaries process these incredibly mixed signals? Do they just pause and wait for clarification?
No, the militaries largely ignore the public signals and just keep watching their radar screens.
Wow, really?
Yeah. This raises an important question about politics. What you're witnessing is the theory of domestic audience costs playing out in real time.
Domestic audience costs.
Yes. In high-stakes conflicts, international diplomacy frequently takes a backseat to domestic political survival.
Yeah.
Both leaders are speaking to their own people, not to each other.
Oh, so they're effectively standing on separate stages, performing for entirely different crowds?
That's exactly it. President Trump is managing his base, projecting the image of a dealmaker who uses military might to force capitulation.
Right, I hit them hard, they begged me to stop.
Exactly. Meanwhile, the Qatam al-Anbiya Central Headquarters must manage its own domestic stability. The Iranian military apparatus cannot afford to look weak, subservient, or fractured to its citizens or its regional proxies.
So acknowledging that they asked the U.S. to stop would be a fatal admission of vulnerability for them.
Precisely. Therefore, the institutional language has to be absolute fight to the last breath, crushing response, even if backdoor diplomatic channels are actually completely open behind the scenes.
That is wild. Which brings us to the final sobering piece of the puzzle. The Defense Secretary, Pete Hegseth, steps up to the microphone outside CENTCOM headquarters down in Florida.
Yes, the ultimatum.
He issues a very stark ultimatum regarding this contested peace agreement. Hegseth publicly warns of a severe blow if Iran does not sign the agreement to end the conflict.
It is the diplomatic equivalent of holding a loaded weapon to the negotiator's head. You demand compliance with an off-ramp while explicitly threatening devastating consequences if they refuse.
But the true leverage Hegseth applies isn't just the threat of force, right?
No, it's the ambiguity of how that force will be applied.
And that brings up the most unsettling part of his press conference. A reporter presses Secretary Hegseth point blank, asking if attacking civilian infrastructure constitutes a war crime.
A very direct question.
Very direct. And Hegseth evades answering the question directly. He uses very specific, sanitized language instead. He states that the U.S. will hit targets that improve our operational environment and weaken capabilities that Iran wants to maintain.
Capabilities that Iran wants to maintain, that specific phrasing is not accidental.
No.
Not at all. It is meticulously crafted by defense lawyers and strategists.
So what does this all mean? Because that's an incredibly broad umbrella. A power grid is a capability a nation wants to maintain.
Yes, it is.
A highway system, a commercial port, telecommunications networks, those are all capabilities. By refusing to answer the war crime question and using that vague language, he is intentionally blurring the line between a purely military target, like a Patriot radar, and civilian infrastructure.
You are hitting on the exact psychological mechanism at play here. In defense strategy, this is the weaponization of strategic ambiguity.
Strategic ambiguity.
Yeah. By not explicitly ruling out civilian infrastructure, the United States is maximizing the pressure on Iranian leadership. The defense establishment is essentially saying, we will not define the limits of our targeting until after we strike.
Wow. So it forces the adversary to imagine the absolute worst-case scenario.
Exactly. It is a psychological lever to coerce that signature on the June 11th agreement.
The underlying message is, sign the paper, or we grant ourselves the authority to decide what a capability is tomorrow morning.
It is coercion through calculated uncertainty. And it perfectly encapsulates the entire dynamic of June 11th. Think about it.
Yeah.
The physical strikes shape the battlefield, the political rhetoric shapes the domestic narrative, and the strategic ambiguity shapes the diplomatic pressure. Everything is working in tandem, even if it looks like chaos.
Let's pull all of these threads together then. Because when you look at the entirety of this V-Express report, the complexity of a single 24-hour period is just staggering.
It's a lot to process for just one day.
Right. On the ground and in the air, we witnessed a highly advanced, mirrored exchange of strikes. Both the United States and Iran bypassed general destruction to systematically hunt the other's nervous system.
Yes, the radars and comms.
They aimed to blind and deafen each other by taking out radars, surveillance, and communication antennas across Kuwait, Bahrain, and Iran.
The physical reality was a race for tactical paralysis.
Then, layered directly on top of that physical reality, we have a massive diplomatic paradox. The U.S. president claims the adversary is begging for a ceasefire, and a deal is imminent.
While at the exact same time,
The Iranian Supreme Military Command categorically denies any talks and swears a blood oath to fight to the last breath.
a total contradiction.
And tying it all together is the U.S. Defense Secretary, looming over the entire situation, leveraging vague language about capabilities to threaten catastrophic civilian damage if the Phantom Agreement isn't signed.
And this multi-layered reality is exactly why consuming news beyond just the headline is an absolute necessity for you as a listener.
Because if you don't look deeper, you miss the whole picture.
Exactly. If you only read a blurb about an Iranian drone hitting an antenna or a quote from an official predicting peace, you are only seeing a tiny fraction of the machinery.
You would assume the conflict is either winding down entirely or spiraling into World War III, depending entirely on which notification you happen to click that morning.
Right. Understanding the intent behind a strike, like why taking out a radar is a precursor to a larger strategy, and recognizing how leaders manipulate their domestic audiences while their militaries trade fire, that is the anatomy of a real geopolitical crisis.
It's all connected.
It is never just about what is blowing up. It is about what that explosion forces the opponent to do next.
That is such a crucial point and really the ultimate takeaway from unpacking this report. But before we wrap up this deep dive, I want to leave you, our listener, with a final puzzle to mull over.
Oh, I love this part.
Yeah. So we have established through the intelligence that on June 11th, both the U.S. and Iran were pouring immense resources into aggressively destroying each other's communication arrays and antennas.
Right. Dismantling the nervous systems.
They were actively dismantling the infrastructure required to talk, to see, and to verify information.
They were systematically blinding and deafening one another, yes.
Yet, if the political claims are to be believed, there was a delicate, highly consequential peace agreement sitting on a table that very same day, waiting to be finalized to stop the war.
The supposed June 11th agreement.
Right. So here is the paradox to take with you. If you have successfully executed a military campaign to completely destroy your enemy's ability to transmit and receive communications, how exactly are you supposed to reliably communicate with them to confirm that the peace deal has actually been signed?
It's a fantastic question.
Think about the logistics of getting a signature from an adversary you just intentionally deafened. Keep that contradiction in mind the next time you see a breaking headline.